Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. A week after a big political controversy about what precisely to call immigration detention facilities, we are learning day by day even more horrifying details about the conditions at those places. We now know of 2 Customs and Border Protection facilities where hundreds of children were detained under dangerous conditions, in some cases for up to weeks at a time, forced to care for each other amidst outbreaks of lice and flu. A doctor who visited one of the detention centers said the conditions, quote, could be compared to torture facilities. One law professor who saw some of those conditions firsthand will join me in just a moment. But already today, under pressure, the government has now moved more than 300 children out of one station in Clint, Texas. And nevertheless, broader questions remain. Why do these conditions and situations keep happening over and over? Who is in charge? Where is the accountability? Are there other facilities we don't even know about with similar or worse conditions? But the president and the vice president were forced to defend and address those conditions and turn to blaming Democrats.
We're doing a fantastic job under the circumstances. The Democrats aren't even approving giving us money. Where is the money? You know what? The Democrats are holding up the humanitarian aid.
We'll get a response from a Democratic member of Congress in just a few minutes. We do know that since the president ramped up his rhetoric about a border wall in January and had a big showdown fight about it, the number of crossings has risen sharply, as has the number of people in detention and reports of conditions going from bad to even worse. Here with me now, someone who saw the conditions at that facility in Clint, Texas in person, Professor Warren Binford, a professor of law at Willamette University. Professor, first just tell me what you saw in that facility.
Yeah. Well, we saw children who were being forced to live in horrendous conditions that no child should ever have to live in. You've mentioned the influenza outbreak where children were put into isolation. You've mentioned the lice infestation in one of the rooms that resulted in the Border Patrol guards removing all of the bedding from the cell that the children were being kept in and forced to sleep on the cement ground. Many children reported that they regularly were forced to sleep on the cement, including infants and toddlers and preschoolers. We saw the children who were dirty and some of them smelled. We saw their clothes were stained. There was no soap. They were infrequently allowed to brush their teeth or take a shower, and even then it was only for a moment or two. They were being fed frankenfood that isn't suitable to give children, especially not on a daily basis, and they were given the same breakfast, same lunch, same dinner day after day, and we're talking about instant foods. We're talking about Kool-Aid. We're talking about frozen burritos. It just is not a way to care for children who are our responsibility as a nation.
Let me ask you this. I mean, the conditions you described sound just monstrous.
Yeah.
How many children are there, and how long were they there, and where were the adults?
Yeah. So this is one of the things that shocked us right away. We did not even have this Border Patrol facility on our radar when we were planning our trip, this inspection. But we had heard the week before we left that there were children that were in recent weeks being moved to this facility. So we showed up there not sure how many children were going to be in this facility with a maximum capacity of 104. There were over 350 children, Chris. And we scanned the list, and immediately we saw 0, 0, 1, 2, 4, 5. They were all ages. They were infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and we couldn't figure out where they were keeping them. So we talked to the chief officer, and he indicated that they had recently expanded the facility, but we couldn't see an expansion. So after we were done with interviewing on the first day, we drove around the facility, and the only thing that we could see that appeared to be new was a metal warehouse with no windows. And we couldn't fathom that the American government would truly be keeping hundreds of children in a metal warehouse. And yet, in fact, when we came back the next day and we asked the Border Patrol and we asked the children, that was, in fact, where many of the children were being kept.
Why were these children... They shouldn't be there. They should not be in this CBP facility. They shouldn't be there for longer than 72 hours max. What category are they in? Why were they there, and where were the adults that they should be attached to, if there were any?
Basically, what happened was all of the children that I interviewed, they had come to the United States with adult relatives, and they were coming to family in the United States. So they all had, almost all of them had telephone numbers, at least the ones who were verbal. And basically what they were trying to do is bring their family together. They were separated from their families at the border. Some of the family members were parents. We had one family where the father, the mother, and the sister were taken in one direction, and this little girl, who was probably about second grade, was taken in another direction. She didn't want to go with the Border Patrol, and she was very upset, and her father came to her and said, honey, it's okay, they're going to take you to a place that's better for children. And they, in fact, took her to the Clint Border Patrol facility. So basically, you've got children coming across the border with relatives, being taken away from the relatives. They're supposed to go to Border Patrol to be processed, and then within a matter of hours, because Border Patrol stations are notoriously horrendous places,
right,
they're supposed to be transferred into ORR custody. But the Office of Refugee Resettlement wasn't assigning these children to a placement quickly enough so that they could be reunited with their family. So really, that's where the breakdown is that it's not so much with the Border Patrol, it's really with ORR not coming and getting these kids and giving them to their parents immediately.
So this is key. You're saying the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is under the Department of Home, which is under HHS, and notoriously was part of the bureaucracy that oversaw child separation, that they are essentially just allowing these children to languish in these facilities.
Right, and I don't want to say that they're allowing them to languish, because that's not precisely, I think, the dynamic that we're seeing here. What we're seeing is massive mismanagement of this department and a tremendous waste of taxpayer money. So that, for example, right now, many of these children are being put, when they are in ORR custody, in placements at places like Homestead and the Walmart, which I've visited, the Tornillo Tent City, when that was open, which I also inspected. And these facilities cost about $750 per day per child. That is what we would pay to put a child in the Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah.
These are not Ritz-Carltons. Yeah. And to make it worse, these kids are being kept there not for the 20 days that they're allowed to be kept by law, but rather for 5, 6, 7. We've interviewed children who have been in these facilities for longer than 9 months at this cost. And if you do the analysis, Chris, you will find out that you can save the taxpayers $1 billion a year simply by taking the children who have families here in the United States, who have parents in the United States, and placing them with those parents.
All right. Professor Warren Binford, thank you so much for sharing that. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.